Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, wherever you are joining us from. And thank you so much for being here with us today. Welcome to today's session on Give to Gain, How Women Build Networks of Change Across the World. My name is Haseena Farid. I'm a leadership consultant and executive coach and co-founder of the Women of Colour Global Network, where we work with women of colour to get into and thrive in leadership roles. It's a real pleasure to be chairing today's conversation. Now, I'm sitting here in the UK. We have panelists from the UK and India with us today. But before we get started, I'd love to see who's in the room. So you should see a quick poll come up on your screen. So just let us know where you are coming from today. Where are you joining us from? I'll give you a few seconds for that. Oh, be really interesting if we've got a global room. Yeah, I think let's maybe close the poll so I can just get a quick pulse check of where you're at. Oh, wow, fantastic. Truly global. Asia, Africa, Europe, all over the place. Brilliant. Love it. Welcome, everybody. Really great to see you. So today, the session is part of the International Women's Day programme. Across the world, women have always built networks of support, sharing knowledge, opening doors, mentoring one another, and creating opportunities for the next generation. Now, these networks are one of the quiet engines behind social and economic progress. But that work was never meant to carry the whole weight. And the numbers really do remind us why. So let me just give you a few stats. The Trade Union Congress here in the UK published figures just last month. Women in the UK are effectively working 47 days a year for free. I'll just let that statistics land with you. That's what the pay gap actually looks like. Globally, Unicef tells us 122 million girls are still out of school. And that's despite real progress over the last 2 decades. So that's 122 million girls not yet getting the investment that they need. And when we look at who makes it to the very top, McKinsey's data shows us that just 7% of C-suite roles are held by global majority women. So things are changing, but not fast enough and not for everyone. Now, gender equality doesn't move forward just because women show up for each other. It moves when organizations, institutions, and leaders invest intentionally. So when they give access, not just encouragement. And what happens when they match that effort? And that's what we're here to explore today. So before I introduce our incredible panelists today, a quick note on how the session's going to run. We're going to spend most of the session in conversation with our panelists, and then we'll have time for your questions towards the end. A couple of things for you to note. Captions are available by clicking on the captions button on the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of the screen. And if something comes up that you would like to ask, please don't wait. Pop your question into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen straight away. And you can also, just a reminder, you can vote up questions that other people have asked. But please use the Q&A box for questions only related to this session. Anything else, you can use the chat boxes just below. I'm going to pick up on some of those questions, and I'll endeavour, where a question comes up that connects to something we're already talking about, I'll endeavour to bring that in. Okay. So let me introduce our panelists for today. We are thrilled to have these experts with us today. So our first panelist is Mylene Sylvestre, Managing Director of Publishing and E-commerce at The Guardian News and Media. She's also co-founder of the Women of Colour Global Network. Mylene brings her experience of leading in a major media organisation, and her work co-founding Women of Colour Global Network means she really understands firsthand what it takes to build networks that support and advance global majority women. Next is Aashraya Seth. Aashraya is founder of Impact 91 and Happy Periods India, and a He for She Fellow for UN Women. His award-winning work on menstrual equity, girls' education, and gender justice has reached over 500,000 women and girls across India. Today, he's going to bring with him his perspective on investing in girls and communities and why engaging boys and men is essential to this work. And our third panellist is Sarah Davis. Sarah has a portfolio career working as a fractional general counsel with the legal director and as an executive coach. She has over 20 years of non-executive board leadership experience, spanning corporate governance, international development, the arts and education. So Sarah will be bringing with her today her governance and institutional lens to today's conversation. Right, well, welcome all. That was a big old introduction. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you all. So I'm conscious of time. Let's dive straight in. So this is a question to all three of you. Where have you seen women supporting women, and what difference did that make? So I'm going to come to Mylene first with that one.
Okay, really delighted to be here, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Haseena. So an example of women supporting women that really stayed with me was on a trip I made about 20 years ago to India. I was in Pondicherry. And there was a collective led and launched by women, which was around plastic recycling. And the whole purpose of the collective was to actually give financial independence, a sense also of self-worth and solidarity. And, it was 20 years ago, so actually it was quite a pioneer program at the time. And I remember just being really moved and impressed by what they achieved. It was actually focusing on women from lower castes, and the impact it had on the community and on that group of women themselves was just amazing. And so that's the first example that came to mind when you asked that question for me. It was just really beautiful, really powerful, and really meaningful.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mylene, for that. I'm going to come to Aashraya. Same question for you.
Thanks, Haseena, for the question. Very pleased to be here. Yeah, I mean, I've witnessed this most powerfully through our work at Happy Periods and grassroots, menstrual health initiatives across South Asia. When women come together to speak the silence around periods, a topic shrouded in shame and misinformation, the ripple effects are extraordinary. And I've seen, mothers and daughters communicate for the first time. Girls staying in school instead of dropping out, and entire communities sort of reimagine what's possible when women have autonomy over their bodies. But what struck me most is how women supporting women doesn't just solve individual problems, right? It sort of dismantles the whole system. And when a woman mentor teaches another about, menstrual health, she's not just stating facts. She's kind of modeling that her body, her health, her voice matters. And that belief becomes very contagious. And, I've watched a number of grassroots networks of women health workers become the architects of such cultural change in their communities. And that's the difference. The difference is it's measurable in school attendance, economic participation, and dignity. But most importantly, which is sort of immeasurable, is the confidence of a 12-year-old girl who no longer, feels ashamed of being human.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. We're going to come back to some of those points that you just discussed there. They're really interesting. Sarah, let me come to you. Where have you seen women supporting women? What difference did that make?
Sure, thank you. Well, like everybody else, thank you for having me. Really, really pleased to be part of this conversation. And Aashraya, that was really immediately moving and immediately on point, really. Where I've seen women supporting women and really making a change is the Women's Prize for Fiction, which is a charity that I'm on the board of, so raise my interest there. Last year it celebrated its 30th anniversary, and it was brought about by a group of women who in 1991 realized that the Booker Prize, which is a prestigious book award, didn't have a single woman author on the on the panel, on the shortlist. Now, on one level, that's of course fine because the judges are entitled to judge what they want. But the issue was that nobody really noticed, and that was the worrying thing. And the founder, one of the co-founders of the Women's Prize, Kate Moss, a very successful author, an incredible champion of women in this space of publishing, with a collection of other women and men, supported the idea of what if we created this space for women publishers, women writers, to support women writing. 30 years on, there's still issues around pay gap, and we'll talk about that. There's still kind of a lot of stats that show things there's not parity by any means, but supported and basically created a market in which women's writing is taken seriously. And that I think the longevity of something that started with a collection of women and a network of women into something that is the largest and most well-known sort of women's publishing prize in the world is a real testament to just the power of a collective network of women coming together.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, all of you. You can just see it, you can hear it, can't you? The power of these networks, and clearly women are building these networks. I guess the question is really whether organisations are matching that effort. So Mylene, let me come to you. What does it look like then when an organisation really invests in women's progression?
Yeah, so I'll start by maybe talking about a network that I co-founded with you, Haseena, the Women of Color Global Network, and it came from lived experience within the company where I work at the moment, The Guardian, where we were having a lot of conversation with younger women. Haseena and I were quite senior at the time, and specifically younger women of color who felt that despite having been on every training, being really driven, working really hard, and not having any performance issues, they were not progressing or felt unseen or unheard. So we basically try to think about maybe creating a structure where we could collect this information, but also where we could create a space where we could have this conversation and support each other. So I would say we created with a network the place we wish we had when we were younger. And it's just been an amazing thing. We launched in 2021, and there are tangible results. I can see it in my workplace because in addition to creating the network, Haseena devised this development program called Pathways, and this is something that the Guardian's been committed to for 3 years now. And it's really having an impact on that specific community, so women of color within the organization. It's a mix of mentoring, all the mentors are external women of color, of sponsoring, so all men and women at the top of the organization are involved in the program, and their role is to open doors, put people on specific projects. So all the mentees basically get opportunities that they haven't been given due to systemic barriers that women and women of color in particular have to face in their professional lives. So that program, we're running it now for the 3rd year. We're about to start. And it's been a real success. It's been mentioned in the equity report that The Guardian publishes. I think it's one of the most successful programs that's been run. And the reason why it's worked, I think it's because there has been commitment from the two most senior women at The Guardian, the editor-in-chief and the CEO. So I think that's crucial. You need actually people at the top to really believe in any program you're going to start in the company, so that actually the company realize that this is a genuine thing that they want to work on and improve. So buy-in from the top, an investment over the long term, I would say that's probably the most important thing as well, because it's quite easy to invest in a one-off program. It's tick box. You can say, oh, we've done this for that specific community, but actually the impact is then really limited So I think the strengths in this program has been that we've managed to iterate it and improve it based on the feedback we've had from people who've gone through it, based on the feedback from the mentors and of the sponsors as well. So to have the buy-in from a company that's ready to commit, and then to also listen to the feedback and act upon the feedback, has been transformative. So it's kind of what's been interesting is that the Guardian has actually committed to it at a time when most companies are retracting from those programs, which is actually really depressing. But I think, it's needed more than ever. So genuine commitment and bravery, it shouldn't be a brave move to do those programs, but it's seen quite edgy and brave to do it, which is really mad. But I think that commitment over the long term is just fantastic and the key to success, I think.
Yeah. So I'm really hearing sort of buy-in, commitment, getting senior leadership involved, but also something there about it being an iterative process, so kind of learning as you go along as well from the feedback from your staff, I guess. What would you say to organizations that may say, I don't have the resources to do this work?
I think that actually it leads to identify emerging talent. So I kind of, it's an investment that's really smart, because if you want to be a company that's actually relevant and where your workforce is representative of the society you operate in, I think it shouldn't really be a question or a choice. It should just happen. We know those barriers exist. All the stats show it. So actually be intentional in tackling those issues, I think, is really a key to success and essential if you want to create a culture of inclusivity. Women of color, one of the most vulnerable groups with really issues on performance, promotions, development, pay equality. So if you treat the most kind of vulnerable group in your company well, everyone will benefit from it. So I just think it makes human sense and also commercial sense to do it.
I love that. Thank you. I'm gonna move on from this. I know we're gonna come back to some of these topics, but I want to just zoom out a little bit, actually, and I'm going to bring Aashraya into the conversation now. Your work starts much earlier, before we even get to the workplace and the boardroom. Where have you seen investing in girls early make the biggest impact, or biggest difference, I should say?
Sure, yes. I mean, I've seen early investments in girls create the most dramatic, multiplier effect in sort of, if I kind of take it like three critical moments, where first would be, puberty and menstruation, when girls sort of receive comprehensive menstrual health education, access to hygiene products before their first period, everything changes. And at happy periods, we've documented that girls who aren't shamed about menstruation stay longer in school, perform better academically, and develop healthier relationships with their bodies. One girl who has to stay in school becomes a woman who educates her own children. And that's what we're looking at, is an intergenerational impact in a single intervention. Second, I would call, a leadership and voice, where girls who are given platform to speak, lead clubs, or participate in decision-making at school level, develop confidence that compounds throughout the life. And I've seen girls in, refugee camps who are given voice in health committees, become advocates, negotiators, and change makers. And they don't just gain these skills, they just kind of internalize that their opinion matter. And the third, I would say, is, which happens to be one of the most important ones, is economic literacy and opportunity. Where girls who learn financial basics, entrepreneurship, vocational skills early don't just earn more, they negotiate better, invest in their communities, and sort of pass that wealth building knowledge to the next generation.
Yeah. I love that. That's so interesting. And you're seeing sort of the self-advocacy piece as well is huge, isn't it? So the confidence, it sounds like the confidence is there. it's giving them a platform to be able to use their voice as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really hearing that. But you know, when we encourage, obviously, I'm hearing that we're encouraging girls to be confident from a young age, but when they enter the workplace, you know, many still face inequality when they enter the workplace. Where do you think the system is still failing those girls?
I think in a lot of places. I will give. I'll come back to the work piece
Yeah,
in a few seconds. I'll just talk about the menstrual health work, and then because I've been looking at that intergeneration bit. So at a lot of places, as I said, and when I'm talking about our work on menstrual equity, we look at the highest intervention.
yeah,
So top bottom, do we have a government policy in place? Yes, we do. If I'm talking about India, the government of India started implementing the menstrual hygiene policy for school-going girls. Moreover, this January 30th in 2026, the Supreme Court of India declared menstrual hygiene a fundamental right under Article 21, which is right to life, mandating all states, union territories to ensure free biodegradable sanitary pads and separate toilets for girls in all schools, government or private, within 3 months, aiming to end school absenteeism, which is brilliant, right? But are the respective state governments equipped to deliver this and close that leaky pipeline which is stopping the girls from accessing that fundamental right?
yeah,
And that's where intervention like ours come into picture. Now I look at the workplace where do we have enough resources at the workplace? Are we investing enough? When women coming back from and years of maternity leave, are there return to work policies? Are there any upskilling arrangements, resources to bring them up to speed, what they've been missing out for 9 months and a year? Is
yeah,
there a posh committee to address sexual harassment at workplaces? If
yeah,
not, then clearly the system is clearly failing the girls. And
absolutely.
you asked me about the early investment, and that's I conclude that's where the worst part is. But by the time we realize, women are slipping through the cracks, she's internalized the message that early investments, were kind of false hopes. We've
Yeah,
created, kind of, disillusionment, but which is not an empowerment.
absolutely. Yeah, no, and such an interesting point and a really valid point. And I think it's something that both Mylene and Sarah would have seen in organizations as well. Mylene, I just want to bring you in here. Does that connect with something that you mentioned to me about working, mothers who have sort of effectively given up their careers to stay at home? Tell me a little bit more about that and how that connects to what Aashraya just mentioned.
Yeah, it was a kind of personal example where went to a uni reunion at the weekend with uni friends, and there were 5 women there. So we all had the same level of education, quite similar family background. And 3 of them had actually given up from very promising careers to follow their husband who were becoming expats. So they all moved across different countries, and they all stopped their career basically to raise children. They chose to have children. And now that we're in our 50s, a lot of them are kind of, it's quite difficult because they realize now that their children are actually leaving home, that they focused on that for about 20 years, and now there's a big question on what to do, and an identity crisis in a way. And what was interesting is that despite them being quite assertive and educated, all of them said that there hadn't been really a discussion at the time when the family decided to move. It was almost a kind of natural thing where they ended up being the one either not working or having jobs that were kind of flexible around the family, etc. And I just, because it's not the path I chose, I'm the main earner in my family. And so for me, it was kind of quite a contrast and quite shocking that, the discussion wasn't had. And they also question why they didn't raise it at the time. It's kind of those patterns and expectations that society puts on women can affect every class, and it kind of they were all French, so it's kind of, I think it's an international issue basically.
Yeah,
So it was just quite telling.
yeah. And I guess, because I think the thing we're talking about here is that we keep kind of asking women and girls to change, or but it's not really about that. It's about the systems around them need to change. And I think this idea of what you were saying earlier about that there are organisations out there that have now created, I think, or you gave me an example where
Yeah.
women back in and retrain them and skill them. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a program I've come across with the woman in my family who stopped working for 20 years. She was a consultant for KPMG, I think, at the time, and then again decided, she stopped working for about 20 years, raised her three children, and then actually in late 40s wanted to start a career again. And she mentioned a program called the Careers Returners. So it's a program focusing on these women who've had a long career break, but actually really want to come back to the workplace and have a meaningful career. So I just thought that was brilliant, and that every company should have an element of this for women who've chosen to raise a family and come back. It's from my own experience, it's not easy to come back from maternity leave. Often, if you start working part-time, or you feel that you're neither a good mother or a good operator because you're part-time. It took me three children to get it right, I think. The first time I came back after my first maternity leave, I was in a very male-dominated team. And every Wednesday when I was finishing for the week, they would say, "Oh, kind of thanks for popping in and, have a great weekend." And I just felt awful.
Yeah.
So things have changed, but I just think there's still more we can do so that we look after people who come back, and it's probably the same for fathers, to your point about men needed also to change and expectations from society needed to change. We need to be better at supporting parents or people's in their life choices so that they don't feel discriminated against when they come back.
Absolutely. And let's talk about that, because Aashraya, I know your work, you focus a lot on bringing men and boys into this conversation, this discussion. So tell us a bit more about that and what you're doing.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, couple of things. I mean, there's always has been this conversation of why do we engage men and boys in this conversation of gender equity, right? I mean, and the answer has always been very simple, that because boys are watching. And when we're talking about empowering 50% of the world's population, we can't do that by ignoring the other 50% who are some or the other, remotely responsible in a lot of the stereotypes and, pushing women back to some extent. And yeah. And I've been working with UN Women's He for She program to engage men and boys in gender equity, and also have authored the UN Women's flagship, the He for She Barbershop Toolkit. And what I've been learning is when boys see their fathers, uncles, and male role models, it sort of normalizes menstruation, respecting girls' education, and share, household labor or work. Their entire worldview shifts, and then they don't grow up, undermining women's progress. They become allies who protect and sort of amplify it. And then there are a lot of, I think there are a lot of critical other reasons as well, where without boys understanding why girls deserve investment, you get fathers, who are pulling daughters out of school, husbands who are dismissing, wives' ambitions, male colleagues blocking, women's advancement. A boy who sort of respects menstruation, supports his sisters, education, shares household, work, and becomes a man who votes for policies supporting women, partners equitably, and raising his own children with gender equity. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work in this space. I also formed a program called as Alvida Patriarchy. Alvida as an Urdu word means bye-bye in English. Engaging with, grassroots men and boys, on how do we give them tools, practical tools to, sort of normalize these conversations in their everyday life, managing this household. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can imagine when you told me about this, actually, I was thinking but how do you do that? It must be challenging to have those conversations, because you're talking about, we're talking about ingrained, embedded sort of, yeah, conditioning here. How do you break that? I've got Mylene's got her hand up. So Mylene, did you want to come in on that right now?
Yeah, I would just really move back what Aashraya said. I have three sons, and so I'm kind of the minority in the household. Even my cats are male, and so the question of periods and kind of the whole cycle for women. So going from the first time you have period, and then you're a mother, you're pregnant. I was really sick when I was pregnant, so I've had to explain to my boys a lot about my body, my mental health, hormones, and period is a big topic because it affects my moods. So
Yeah.
they're very attuned to, what's happening with me, knowing that when I start shouting a bit too much, is that something's going on. And I just feel that actually being really open and with those conversations with them is really important. I feel that, hopefully they will kind of be good partners if they decide to have female partners, and just not. I've never been shy of explaining, kind of what's happening, for when they were younger and blood, and it can be scary, and maybe that, they think it's disgusting. And so I've really tried to normalize it as part of what women have to go through, which is not easy. So I totally agree with Aashraya that the education for boys and men is so critical. Even in the workplace, I think women should have every month more days off to cope with period. And so I just think it's a fascinating topic and so important. And there's so much we need to do, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And normalizing, I'm taking away, we just need to start normalizing these things. I guess
Yeah.
in different cultural contexts, though, I'm interested about that because, Ashra, you're doing this work in India, and I completely understand sort of coming from a culture where these things are not necessarily talked about, are perhaps taboo subjects. Women from a young age, having a period is almost seen as, impure in some circles. So how do you break those stigmas? How do you sort of, even enter into a conversation with a man, around these topics that may be so, do you know what I mean, culturally embedded? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, see, it's a difficult one. It's genuinely a difficult one. Took me a few years to crack the code, and genuinely there is no code. The only code is that it's a continuous effort. It's a behavioral change, and it's not like you do one activity, you invest 100,000 rupees, and it's sorted. It's not sorted. You will have to have multiple conversations. You will have to have engage men and boys at several levels, whether it is at a school level where we are looking at, 60 to 70% male principals who are in their late 40s, early 50s, who have no understanding, of how this works. And they think like, okay, this is an alien concept. Why are we doing this? We have to engage with young fathers who have, again, grown up with similar sort of mindset, not have been understanding these critical issues. They've got their daughters at home, so engage with them. We have to engage with the policy makers at federal level, at state level, at the district level to make them understand, there are policies in place. How do we ensure that there is equitable access to resources, there is gender, friendly budgeting in the resources that they're allocating? How are we, engaging these and communicating the work that they're trying to do and we are trying to do in a very equitable manner, across board.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just a theme that sort of keeps coming up actually is this sense of kind of how do we also take policy and how can we take the words and make sure that we are now there's action with these words and a behavioral change. I'm going to bring Sarah in because this is I really like your perspective on this, Sarah. You've been inside those systems at that board level. So what actually helps move the dial then for women?
Yeah, yeah. It follows really well from the kind of previous conversation because policy is not behavior, it's not actions. And what changes is intentionally looking to change behaviors. And there are a couple of things I think that are essential for that to work. One of them is accountability, right? It has to be somebody, there has to be accountability for this thing happening, for the change that you want to happen to happen. And part of, I think, that is that in a complex organization, so I think about this from the board's point of view, for something to happen or be promoted or to be kind of encouraged, you have to understand that there are trade-offs necessary, and you have to support the executive with the changes that they want to make and understand what then gets traded as a result of that. And those are really kind of, I think, essential conversations. Organizations I sit on the board of, they want to do the right thing. They want to increase equity across their organization for all stakeholders. To do that, you need a plan and you need to understand what your trade-offs are in order to do that. You also have to measure it and make it really visible. So things like pay gaps, gender pay gaps, kind of equity impact assessments, understanding what needs to change to get the result you want, and being really deliberate about promoting the actions that you want to see and the expectation of when you want those things done by. So I think this is where, actually, as a member of the board, your support to the executive is to hold their feet to the fire for these things that as an organization you want to do. Otherwise, it's just words. And the gap between what an organization says and what it does is really damaging for the organization. It's damaging for its credibility. It's damaging for the discretionary effort that colleagues are prepared to give to an organization because they value what the organization says, specifically thinking about equity and equality for women in the workplace. You lose that at your peril if these are just words, but these words don't translate into action. And how to make them translate into action is really understanding what needs to happen differently for that to work, and what it is, and what your trade-offs are around that, I think, is the way I'd answer that. And that comes from being really intentional and quite granular about what you need to see and where you need to spend money to support it. So, for example, the Pathways program that is part of the network that you and Mylene co-founded, actually it's a specific substantive thing that an organization has said that it will commit to in order to create some change. It's at that level of granularity, I think, that organizations need to think about what are they going to do or what do they want to do to achieve what their policy position is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hearing that. And also, there's something there, isn't there, about every level of that organization needs to be involved. It can't just be something that, happens over here in silo. It really is an ecosystem of kind of support. Yeah.
Absolutely. It has to be threaded through the organization. And I think at a board level, there are some subtle but really effective things that happen. So, for example, where does this discussion come on the agenda of the board is a really kind of significant action that I've seen chairs, and when I've chaired boards, you can take, right? If this is item number 1 or item number 2 of business on your board, then that is a signal. If it's item, 6 of 7, and you're running out of time and it becomes like the 5-minute quick update at the end of the board meeting, that's also signaling something. So I think that's sort of subtle, but this is how power works in a way. Soft and hard power is you are signaling to your executive, this is important to the organization, so it's important to us.
Yeah.
So we're going to treat it like that. So I think, again, sort of at every level and at the board level, which is essentially, you might say, the sort of highest level of oversight of an organization, saying to the organization, we are treating this as seriously as you tell us it is. Therefore, actually, it's agenda item number one, right?
Yeah. And have you seen that then at board level? You've seen that happening where, you know, there are really effective boards out there who are doing that and pushing back and making sure that there's accountability baked in.
Absolutely, and it is. So on the board of UNICEF, I'm on the board of UNICEF UK, and I'm vice chair of UNICEF UK. And I, with another board member, we sponsor the EDI program, and putting that in, creating that relationship between the board members and the executive. And even though the work is not even though in the organization, the work is sort of undertaken and implemented through the operational team, having it held at board level by two trustees, one of whom is the vice chair, is a very powerful message, you know, not just a signal, but it's a very powerful message that you've told us this matters, you told us you want to do this, so we've got you and we will support you. And in the board, we have the conversations about where are we putting our effort, where will we put our resources, because if you've told us this is important, we will advocate for them internally about, you know, how to support it. So I think it is really important understanding that within organizational context there are many things that organizations want to do, and being able to support your colleagues at that board level about the importance around something really makes a difference. Actually, it really makes a difference. Otherwise it's a good intention, and we're full of those. And again, just to come back to something Aashraya said earlier about, you know, avoiding the creating false hope. We want to be consistent in the stories we tell about to women about the world of work, and we tell these stories to them from when they are children, from when they are young girls. And I think that there is really something incredibly important about honoring, I think, the kind of reality of what it should be like, and actively being part of the change you want to see, actually, to put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I hear you. And you know, going back to your point about policies, you know, are kind of words, not actions. Why do you think policies don't always translate into lived experience then for women in organizations?
Yeah. I think it's the flip side of that, because knowledge is not the same as behavior. So, you know, you know what the policy says, we know what we want to do, but yeah, actually same old, same old. And I think that is why it's kind of what are the trade-offs that you make here? What are you going to do differently? And what does that require of the organization? And what are you going to stop doing? What are you going to stop doing, right? We kind of these entrenched systemic biases are need to be stopped. So which part of it, which one of those are you going to stop actively in order to make a change for the women in your workplace? And I think so a policy without behavior around it, a policy without behavior that you can draw a through line from that activity to what you are trying to achieve in the policy, isn't going to work. It is just a piece of paper that you're lucky if people look at it, and maybe you get given it at the start of your kind of induction when you join an organization, and it doesn't live in the organization. And that's why policies fail. And again, worse than that, I think that's where people become disaffected with the organization they're in, because you can have the best policy and it can say all the right things, and if you don't live up to it, you've just disaffected the people that policy is there to support.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. I'm conscious of time. I do actually quickly want to briefly bring Aashraya into this, though, because I think the policy piece is really interesting. Do you see the same thing in education systems and communities, Aashraya? Is it the same problem, you know, what Sarah's describing?
Oh, 100%. It's the same problem. it's the same problem where, a lot of these, I think the other thing is that there's a huge decision-making gap. We are not asking a lot of the times the right questions to the right people. We're not asking what women wants. We're not asking what girls want. It's a small silo led by most men, with some representation of women. I'm sure Sarah would agree to it because she's been on a lot of boards. Um, and that just becomes a unanimous decision, which not always necessarily translates into, resource allocation, into effective implementation, and also, I'm missing the word, but yeah, definitely same
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. No, thank you. Sarah, do you want to come back
Yeah,
in?
just actually a really important point on that, which is the kind of in organizations, employee networks, employee voice, that kind of who you are listening to should inform your policy, right? So you have to listen. And I think that's a really important point, actually, Aashraya. It's a really important point. Who are you hearing this from? Who are you listening? Who's informing what you are going to provide for people? How do you know what they want, right? And it isn't anecdotal. Actually, it's data. So I think, that's a really important point. Thanks for raising that.
Massively so, and I think that's, I guess, the purpose of you and this conversation today is about there are incredible women out there who, with the lived experience, who are building these networks. They're doing them in organizations too, so we need to listen to them. We need to hear from them directly as well about what needs to change. I'm conscious, I'm looking at the Q&As. We've got lots of great questions coming in. So I'm going to pause us here and take a couple of these questions. There's one specifically here to Aashraya, which I think is quite interesting. So this is from Ramina. Aashraya, have you faced negativity as a man in a women's space?
Oh, of course, yes. Yeah, I mean, I've been questioned at a lot of spaces, what are you doing? Why do you have to be in this space? Are you a woman? What is your gender? All sorts of, things that comes across. But that's completely, I mean, it's part and parcel of the job that you sign up for. It's part and parcel of the things that you're, going out to do and solve. If you consciously signed up for social work, I mean, that's the idea. I mean, right, you're fighting misogyny, you're fighting, hundreds of years of patriarchy, which is very systemic.
Yeah.
And these things will come. I mean, if people are not educated or literate enough to understand, these issues, it will take there will be a lot of resistance, but I think you just need to be, mindful of the end goal and the broader picture, what you're trying to solve, and just stay committed.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need people like you. We need more men involved in this, and leading at it. Thank you for that. I've got another question here, which, feel free, any of you, to take it. But how far do you agree with the view that women do not always support one another in the workplace, particularly when senior women exhibit bias against younger employees and influence staff opinions in ways that marginalize them? That's a big one. Who would like to take it? I guess Sarah or Mylene, maybe.
I was just going to, sorry, Mylene. I was just going to jump in with something I remember. I mean, this comes up time and time again, and I think we all grew up breathing the same dirty air, and so for me, that is sort of the answer for it. This is intentional, deliberate change that we're being asked to put our shoulder behind, and I think understanding understanding what is required of you, right? No matter what your experience, but what is required of you. Again, it's be the change you want to see, because we grew up in these. I'm in my late 50s. I grew up in a world of work in which actually conversations like this just didn't even happen, even I'd say 10 years ago, right? So yes, it's out there, and what you're going to do, you just don't be that person, don't be that woman, right? Extend grace to her if you can, because there's something there, but don't be her.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we see through our own work, we pair senior women of color with, early to mid-career women. And my goodness, it's a wonderful way to break down any of those barriers because, both groups are learning from each other actually. And we need to do more of that. We need to sort of break those kind of biases down. Yeah. Mylene, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I feel it's quite interesting that that topic of women not backing other women comes up because
Yeah.
actually you see the same behaviors from men, but I feel there's always an expectation for women actually to be kind of overperforming or better, where actually this is not a bit behavior that you want to see from anyone. Everyone should be supportive of each other, but women are actually vilified for behaving in that way. So I feel it's quite symptomatic of that unfairness in how women are portrayed, and when the same behaviors are actually demonstrated by men, it's not raised as an issue in the same way. And
Yeah.
obviously, I'm not saying it's the right behavior, but it's kind of this lens that's harder for women. Even in the criticism, it's kind of always that bit harsher.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, and maybe you're absolutely right. The kind of the expectations of women are just much higher. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna move on to another question because we've got quite a few questions here, and I feel like there's quite a few things I want to get to. So this is a great one. So we talk about building networks of change, but how do you actually measure whether a network is creating real impact beyond conversations and visibility? Also, in your experience, what differentiates a high impact network from a large but low value one? And how intentional should women be in curating who they give their time and access to? Who would like to take that?
I've got thoughts. That's a really great question, and I think it's a really important one to think about where you put your energies and your labor, because there is also, I think, almost feeding off the back of the other question, there is also almost as well an expectation that you have to give and support and nurture and kind of just always outpouring, always putting your labor in support of anyone who might ask.
Yeah.
And I think being really strategic about what can I give to this network, what can this network give to me, being really strategic. What's my value, why me, and why this organization, having or this network, what do you bring,
Yes.
right? And what is it that you bring to them, not just a general sense of goodwill. Again, I think there's a real difference between being strategic and intentional and having something to offer rather than just being part of something because it's nice to be part of something. So really thinking about where you put your labor, and by labor I mean emotional labor as much as anything as well. Be really strategic about where you put your labor, what you want to support and what you want to see.
Yeah.
Because actually, as I talked about the Women's Prize, that started as a network. It's now something that is integral in the market for publishing and for women writers. So I did just sort of thinking about what is the ROI in a way of this network, and how can your skills support that or not?
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks, Sarah. Mylene, did you want to come in?
Yeah, but because it's been a really important question we've asked ourselves, Haseena, about our own network. Because actually, I think just providing a space to meet up is not enough. So we've been always quite clear on our mission. We've put together this program so that there was something tangible that we could embed to actually drive real change. Because actually our first, I think it was more me, Asina very quickly said no, but we were thinking about, I thought maybe we should do a club. At the time we had this conversation, there were loads of women's clubs opening. And actually I remember Asina saying, yeah, but it's kind of, if we need to drive change, we need to get into organizations, or, we need something more than just a place where people meet up. And I think we've succeeded in being really iterative and also kind of not being led by wanting to have thousands of members. It just been really intentional in making sure that we were clear on the proposition of the network, of it on its mission, what it was trying to do, and how we would implement change. So it's kind of there are a lot of networks, but I think it's important to do the work and the research to see if what they offer is what you're after. And for us, we collect a lot of data so that we can actually measure, how many of our members who went for promotions got promoted, what about pay rises, what about moving to another corporation. So we do regular surveys for members of the program, especially at different stages within the program. So we're really hot on measuring impact. I think it's quite crucial.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think when a network can actually work with an organization to create that kind of framework, that's where it's gold, because you have the lived experience of the women, the professional women who have been able to talk to that, speak to that, but also create a measuring system that works for the organization as well. So I think that's a really good way of working. I'm conscious about time. I just wanted to ask Aashraya, because there's a really good question here. How can we as educators, especially in the basic levels of education, keep encouraging girls and women to study and invest in their careers? I think that's one for you. I'd like you to, if you've got some thoughts on that.
Can you please repeat the question? Sorry, the audio was breaking.
How can we as educators, especially in the basic levels of education, keep encouraging girls and women to study and invest in their careers?
It's a classic question, but I think there's a classic answer to this as well. Bring up women role models to them. Talk about high achieving women who are in the business space, who've become, in STEM fields, specifically, science, tech, engineering, mathematics, women who've become astronauts, women who've been scientists. It's so important because there are a lot of things that you just can't teach through, books, or people can't learn through videos or YouTube. You really need to bring those role models in their life, introduce them. And that's also essentially the idea of the network, right? I mean, what are you doing? You're bringing women from different walks of life on one platform so that they can network. But yeah.
Thank you. Role models, I love it. I'm so conscious of time, and I want to just say I'm so sorry if we didn't get to your questions. There are many that came through, all brilliant questions. We definitely need another session to have a conversation around. I would just like to ask a final question to each of you. Please keep it really brief, 30 seconds if possible. If people leave today and do one thing differently to move gender equality forward, what should it be? And I'm going to come to Sarah first.
Ask for what you want.
Like it. Ask for what you want. Okay, Mylene.
Yeah, it's quite similar actually. Ask for a coffee with maybe a role model, a woman that you find inspiring in your organization or around you, because actually the worst that can happen is a no, but it could just be the start of a really interesting relationships.
Thank you. And Aashraya, last words to you.
Brilliant. I think we are all seeing now. Like my definitely answer was, ask a girl or a woman in your life, what do you need that nobody's asking you about? That's it. One conversation. Don't wait for tomorrow. Do it today. A lot of these investments, policies, toolkits in the world will fail if we are not able to listen to what women and girls actually need. So yeah.
Love that. Thank you. So listening, lots of listening and asking. Thank you so much, Mylene, Aashraya, Sarah. What a conversation. Thank you to everyone who joined us today and sent in those questions. There's going to be a post-survey questionnaire or survey, I should say, it's going to pop up on your screen in a minute. And if you're enjoying today's programs, the next session is going to be at 1:30, and that's going to be called Connecting the Dots, the vital role of networking in career growth. So plenty more to come. You've got a great day ahead of you. So I just, again, thank you everybody for being here. Thanks to our amazing panelists. And we hope to see you all again soon. So goodbye.